Welcome everybody to Eye of the Serpent Tarot for another pick a card reading. So today's reading is episode 8 in the You Through the Houses series. And so of course we're looking at the very mysterious Scorpio ruled 8th house. So all things to do with deep intimacy, deep psychology, the occult and the spiritual, life, death, resurrection, all of the really big ticket items, and also, strangely enough in this house, the connection to other people's resources, power, strategy, and so forth. So we're going to be touching upon those really big ticket but deep themes in today's reading and looking at how that operates for you in your chart. So what we'll be doing, as we always do in all of these particular series, is I will be sort of dividing the timestamps to show a general introduction, which is this. Then there will be a section that is about astrology, where I'm going to talk about, at a very high level, what it would mean to have particular signs in the 8th house, and also what it means to have particular planets in the 8th house. Very high level. Not something for seasoned astrologers, unless they want to listen to it and then maybe add to it in the comments to enrich the reading for others. But it's there for those who are not really astrology people, but who know their chart, have access to it, or if you know your time of birth, place of birth, and date of birth. I mean, obviously you know the date of birth and where you were born, but if you know the time as well, then you can go to various online astrology sites and actually generate a chart so that you can then see what sign you have in the 8th house and what planets you have in the 8th house. So I'm really just going through that on a high level for anybody who's interested. If you're not interested in that, you can skip straight to the pile choice timestamp in the description box below. So I will, when I get to the pile choice, I'll talk a bit about how the reading is going to be structured for this particular reading, so that we can look at all the areas in the 8th house. So you'll see that at that point. What I do want to say too before I start on the astrology is just a sort of general announcement, which I say occasionally in my pick a card videos, which is that if you are interested, you can get a personal reading from me now. You can get it via Etsy. That's the only way that you can get it. The link to my Etsy store is in the description box below, and also connected via a link on my About page on my YouTube channel. So if anybody ever contacts you purporting to be me on Instagram or in DMs on Twitter or whatever it might be, or even the comments in this particular channel or on other YouTube videos, that's not me. I do not ever solicit readings from anybody. You come to me if you're interested. You come via Etsy. I haven't ever had it said to me that this is happening to me, that scammers are impersonating me yet, as at the time I'm recording this, but who knows. And if you do come across something like that, I'd appreciate if you let me know, because I'm certainly never going to do that, and I want to protect people from scammers. The other thing I want to say is, with the Etsy store, if you do decide that you want a reading and you purchase one, please, please, please put your email in the personalization box, because sometimes when people just log on and if they use something like their Apple ID or whatever, I've had situations where I've ended up with what is effectively an email relay service, and it's not in any sense certain that if I message them that they're going to hear the message. And what I'm worried about is if you did that, I might not be able to give you your reading, because I may not be able to contact you, and I may not even be able to contact you to tell you that that's the reason I'm not giving you the reading. So, and then I'd refund, and it would all seem quite mysterious. So please, if you do want a reading from me and you go to the Etsy store, put the email that we can be in contact and I can send the reading to in your personalization box. So enough with those sort of announcements. Let's move into the astrology section. So this is going to be timestamped now as the point where I talk about astrology at a high level for the 8th house. So I'm going to start out with what it means to have signs within the 8th house and then planets. I draw on this information from years of living with and talking with astrologers and so forth, so my own understanding of astrology, and also from reputable sites that I trust online. So it's a bit of an amalgam, but very high level. Okay, so if you have Aries in the 8th house, you're going to be very ambitious and probably quite assertive around things that you find passionate, around intimacy and those sort of areas, very action oriented. You're also likely to be ambitious about use of resources, accessing resources and so forth. And you may be a little bit controlling or assertive, as I say, more generally in relationships. You're also likely to like active sort of energy around spiritual pursuits. If you have Taurus in the 8th house, you really like to ground intense relationships. Taurus is all about the good life, enjoying sensuality, all of those sorts of things. You can be stubborn about change, reinvention, all of those sort of issues, or stubborn around relationships or the use again of resources. If you have Gemini in the 8th house, you've got a very forensic, psychological and communication-oriented view to relationships, whether they be material relationships or the sharing of resources, whether they're passionate and intense, whether they're around spiritual sort of or psychological sort of connections. So you're likely to very much be a meeting of the minds, even with the most passionate relationship to start out with. You may also be a little bit variable in who or the type of people that you want to get intimate or connected with as well with Gemini. If you have Cancer in the 8th house, very, very deep emotional nature, very loyal, very protective of those that you are intimate with and close to, very protective of yourself as well around those sorts of relationships. You may be a little bit slow to commit to really passionate relationships because you do want to protect yourself and others emotionally. And you're likely to keep your most dear people very close and look at things like material resources, strategy, reinvention through the lens of how that protects you and others. If you have Leo in the 8th house, you probably love the drama of the intense relationship and the deep and the passionate. You want, big changes in your life, big developments, big revolutions, and you really have a strong sense of presence and draw people in. You are likely, again, to be very like Aries active and like to sort of see sort of fiery sort of energy around spirituality as well. With Virgo in the 8th house, you want structure and order and grounding to anything that's intense or anything to do with the sharing of resources, also anything to do with change. You like to have a plan, like a business plan or a personal plan around it. You're very, very detail-oriented mind, very forensic, very able to get into the strategy and the detail. And you can certainly ground change and evolution, would be very good at helping others deal with change. With Libra, you might detach a little bit from the intensity of the Scorpio energy in the 8th house and things around passion. Certainly you want to see balance, you want to see fairness around close relationships, intimate relationships, sharing of resources and any change process. You are always trying to balance the intensity with sort of fairness and with a kind of sense of equilibrium. So you may sometimes be a little bit detached from the shadow elements of the 8th house. If you've got Scorpio there, you've got it in its natural house. Scorpio loves the deep. Scorpio loves looking into the shadows, seeing the depth of the psychology, intense, passionate connections, and a very sort of like, loyal and systematic approach to things like resources and so forth. Very much a change agent. Very spiritually and probably occult leaning sort of spirituality. You like the mysteries and so forth. If you have Sagittarius in the 8th house, you'll put a philosophical spin on all the deep issues here, whether it be in intimacy, whether it be spiritual, whether it be resources, whether it be strategy and reinvention. You're very much about freedom and a broader philosophy around things. And you may help others to explore themselves in more sort of free and liberated detail or taboo sort of areas potentially. With Capricorn in the 8th house, there's a great deal of intensity and power connecting here. There is definitely the capacity to rule or make money in connection with others, and certainly a sense of wanting to consolidate and have the traditional around the most close relationships and so forth. But, this shadow element of Capricorn around dealing with power and so forth in the 8th house would suggest that is one of your potential challenges about if you are going to rule with compassion and with balance and not just for the intensity of the leadership type role. If you have Aquarius in the 8th house, it's sort of almost the opposite of that because it's very detached. It's very much the big picture. It's very much the philosophical. So intimate relationships need to sort of fit with a broader philosophy. The sharing of resources needs to fit with the greater good. The spiritual is very sort of future oriented, maybe sort of starseed, that kind of thing. So very much of the higher order philosophy as opposed to the powers and the sort of structure of the world. And if you have Pisces in the 8th house, you're very private about anything that is of deep importance to you or deep passion. Highly psychic and mystical, would really be charging that kind of energy within the 8th house in a very strong way. Probably sometimes a little bit afraid of your own depths or shadow, or you may not truly see the truth of the partners that are around you too. You may idealize them sometimes, or potentially project your own shadow on them. So there's some interesting challenges around the 8th house with Pisces there, but very, very psychic. Okay, so let's have a look at the planets. So if the sun is in the 8th house, you really like to go deep and far in life. You have, powerful desires, powerful sort of sense of destiny, all of those things. You've got a very magnetic personality, and you really like a kind of dramatic, deep life. You're not the superficial. You find out what's under the surface, and, we'll look at what is taboo or deep, and never sort of superficial in the way that you deal with things. With the moon, sort of similarly, you have a deep need to get to those depths emotionally. Fascinated by the depths of the shadow and that kind of energy, very able to navigate that sort of energy and to connect with others on that level. Very loyal, possibly sometimes jealous or possessive. And sometimes you may close yourself off from relationships due to the intensity of the feeling. So you'll probably vacillate between being very open and swimming in those waters and being very kind of detached from it if you feel it could overwhelm you. Mercury in the 8th makes you extremely curious about psychology, about people's motives. You're very analytical, very strategic. In the change energy of the 8th house, you bring a very strong communication sense to how change occurs and so forth. You can be incredibly persuasive, very forensic in the way that you look at things. You get to the depth and the detail. Might be a little bit scary to people sometimes because of the perspicacity of what you see and what you can articulate. With Venus in the 8th house, really intense love nature. You're never casual about relationships or superficial. Even if you were dating, you would be looking for what was deep within the people that you're around. But you do fear vulnerability in love because you know how important it is to you. You want love to be totally consuming. And you could make a business or art out of love as well too. With Mars in the 8th house, very strong passions. Sometimes they manifest, particularly with the major intimate partner later in life. You're a researcher, or an inventor or a psychologist. You like to go to the depths. You need to have action within this space. And you want passion projects. You don't want to do things that would bore you. You have very strong intuition. With Jupiter in the 8th house, you're very talented with strategy, research, investigation, change, revolution, any of those things. You get to the root of issues and you unravel mysteries. You're a natural problem solver. You're naturally going to sort of have a variety of kind of partners. You're not easily shocked, basically. With Saturn in the 8th house, you might resist transformation. And if it's coming, it better come slow and it better be structured and it better make sense, basically. You need to prepare for it, you need to plan and so forth. And it may also be another of the signs of a really close intimate partner later in life. And also potentially strong karmic connections to intimate partners. With Uranus in the 8th house, you do support change. You're actually a natural change agent. You really like to reinvent yourself and reinvent environments. You're a bit like Mars. You really don't want to get bored. That would be one of the worst things for you around the kind of deeper sides of life. You are able to sort of help others, but sometimes they can't keep up with you because you're very, very fast. And you can be impatient and a bit changeable with people who are close to you. With Neptune in the 8th, you've got a very, very deep spiritual longing. It's a bit like having Pisces in the 8th house. Very deep fantasy nature. And again, like Pisces in the 8th house, you may not always see your partners as clearly as you need to. And if it's business partners and things like that where you're relying on resources, really do your homework about this because you can sometimes idealize people. With Pluto in the 8th house, you really love the dark and the taboo. It's a bit like having Scorpio in the 8th house. You're very interested in things like hypnosis, depth psychology, sleep, patterns, dreams, all of that kind of thing. You don't hide it all from the shadow. You're very intense, and you tend to have complicated relationships, some of which have power issues associated with it. Then last but not least, if you have Chiron in the 8th house, Chiron often shows wounding from childhood or early developmental years. So Chiron here can show things like early deaths in the family and that kind of thing. It can also show really high psychic ability, very mystical, very much mediumship and that sort of thing as well too. It's almost as though having experienced some form of loss around early years and so forth, you have a very strong sense of the cycles of life and death and reincarnation and resurrection and all those sorts of things. So that's the very high level walk through the planets and the signs. So now in the timestamps, we will be at the pole choice part of the video. So welcome to those who skipped out on the astrology section of it and just wanted to get to the pole choice, and thanks for hanging in, and I hope that was helpful for those who did stick around for the astrology part of it. So as always, I'll put down the numbers for the different readings for those that like to go by the number of the reading. So as with other episodes in this series, I've chosen the 8 from the 1 to 10 side of each of the suits to represent the different sorts of energies. So that will cover cups, so cups or water signs, swords or air signs, pentacles or earth signs, and wands or fire signs. If you happen to know what sign you have in the 8th house, that might help you choose, but don't feel constrained by that because there's no necessary connection between that sign or type of sign and the cards that have been intuitively pulled and what we'll get in the reading more generally. So, but you may want to choose for that particular reason. You also may want to choose given some of the energies that are in the 8s in the tarot if you know about that. So 8 of Cups is often about clearing emotional issues. 8 of Swords is about finding freedom from philosophies or ideas that we have. 8 of Pentacles is where we are getting the benefits from study and developing skills. And the 8 of Wands is where we have great creative and other action-based choice freedom and so forth. So if you feel that about where you might be with your 8th house and matters in your 8th house, that may help you choose. Otherwise, numbers may help you choose the different decks. So I'm using Rainbow Moon Tarot for pile 1. I'm using White Fly Tarot for pile 2. I'm using the Rebirth Tarot for pile 3. And I'm using the Cute and Creepy Tarot for pile 4. That might help you choose. Otherwise, just meditate in. Of course, go to more than one reading if you want, because there might be messages across it for all. Just to give you a bit of an idea about what we're going to cover, we're going to start with a bit of a map about the sort of shadow power sort of aspects around the 8th house, the spiritual and occult areas, and also the sort of intimacy and connection areas. And then we're going to look at some key relationship archetypes and so forth coming about for you in that particular house. Then we'll move to tarot to look at your intimate connection energy, your depth psychology and strategy, and your spiritual journey in turn. And then we're going to use some oracles to look at your journey in a sense in the 8th house underworld and what you can get from that, and then bring it all together with some astrology and chakra energy at the end. So once you know what reading or readings you want to go to, as always, the timestamps are in the description box below, and I'll see you there. Welcome pile 1 to your reading. So to start off the reading, I'm looking at 3 different elements, and then as I say, we'll look at the archetypes associated with it across the board. These cards are around how you deal with power, change, strategy, and the shadow, all of those sorts of aspects of the 8th house. These are around your spiritual or occult energies, and these are around intimate relationships. And first thing I would say for you, pile 1, is I think there's going to be something between your power in the world, strategy, change, revolution, all of those sort of energies and relationships, because there's a sense here about something to do with dealing with power and being different around relationships. And there's a sort of a sense of potentially drawing envy to you coming from over here in relation to the sort of more intimate relationships and so forth, and I'll get into this in a minute, but I do think they're kind of connected. I think for people coming to pile one, there's something about your most intimate and close relationships that have power dynamics, and that also have to do with your spiritual wisdom. So there's a very deep connection between the three. It's like you don't sort of live on one level in your strategic sort of power of the world type of energy, and then a different level around what you do with your spiritual beliefs and your occult beliefs and knowledge, and then a different level again with relationship. They seem to be intertwined to some degree. And it does look like at the moment there is some energy to release and detox from, because it's almost like you get those three elements. And this sort of picks up over here, as I say, sort of change, shadow, other people's resources, power, that kind of energy of the 8th house. And then you get the sort of spiritual occult energy, and then you get the closest relationships to you in terms of passion. It's like it's exponential because the three are connected. If they were more disconnected, then it wouldn't be as powerful. But there is something, there's change energy around you that has to do with, I think, finding who you can trust and who you want to connect with around relationships. And there maybe in this has been some connection that came through things like spiritual beliefs and so forth that maybe didn't turn out to be what you expected. Like this almost has a feeling of somebody who has potentially got very close to people, whether it's in passion or just in closeness in terms of a group, around a particular type of spiritual knowledge, occult knowledge and so forth, drawn very much to the wisdom of others, but have found that there's something that hasn't worked, that's been very competitive and difficult. Because you vacillate between hunting and looking for and almost being predatory, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but kind of really going after what you want, but also wanting to find the right person to share that with, and knowing that for you that might be a somewhat different sort of energy to other people, and different in some way to what your friends think or your family thinks or whatever. And I think the conduit for you has been around occult and spiritual knowledge, but I just feel that there's something where there's either been a disconnect or there's a potential disconnect. The Goose Girl, one of the reasons I use the fairy tale oracle around close relationships is that it picks up where we have programming, maybe from very young, that impacts on things. And the Goose Girl is all about a princess who goes on a journey with her maidservant, who then won't do anything for her and in fact pretends to be her. So it's about identity theft and competition. Now in the end the Goose Girl does win because of her wisdom and so forth, and her capacity to release energy. So certainly it's saying that if you find yourself in intense relationships where there's a kind of a competition and the person almost wants to devour you and become you in some way or compete with you, you have the capacity to rise above that. And I just feel it's like you may originally in your life, in pursuing your goals in the world and, the change and the evolution of your soul or whatever, be very much front and center. You know what you want, you know what you're going after, and you connect to people that you think are like that and like you and a bit different, and that's all good. And I think there's a spiritual connection here, but I think what happens, and it happens particularly around the closest relationships, is that people who appear to be like you on the same path and backing you are actually sometimes competing with you. So there is a very strong connection between them, and I feel like you have a lot of spiritual knowledge. You may be very well versed in more than one system or the mysteries or whatever. I think that you are drawn to people like that, and I think you're like that, but something happens which needs to be released. So I think one of your real challenges around the 8th house, pile 1, is to find your personal power so that you're not feeling it needs to be found through others, to hunt it for yourself and be the provider of yourself and your own power and your own wisdom, because you have a lot, not looking for it through love or through others. Because I feel like when you do that, quite often you find the person who tries to feed off you. So I think there is an actual quite vampiric energy around the 8th house for you, but it is because you are more advanced and developed around 8th house things, and you are looking for an equal, but it's sometimes hard to find that. So I feel like if you could almost disconnect this and this, if you could disconnect so that basically love came in through a sort of sense of wisdom and so forth, and releasing of energies that didn't work, but you looked for the power energy for yourself rather than in combination with another. You may be quite attracted to the concept of a power couple, and indeed you may end up in one eventually, but I feel like in the process of trying to find that, if you connect them, then you may find that you end up with people in competition. And if you think, oh, spirituality is the way to do it, it's like what's happening here is this energy of sort of envy and trying to almost steal your identity bleeds into this as well. So I just feel like independence within what you're trying to achieve, independence in what you learn, and then ultimately independence in love that brings the right love in is important to you. The kind of intensity of trying to find the one, I think, is bleeding across all the levels for you. So I think that's your challenge. It's understanding your power and knowledge, particularly in 8th house matters, and that many people that you connect with may want to take that from you and be you rather than be with you. And it doesn't mean you can't have an intimate relationship. It just means that if you separate the power dynamics and the knowledge dynamics out, then you take away the sting of this. It's like that releases that, allows the true wisdom of finding the right connection. So let's have a look at what archetypes are generally around you in the 8th house. Oh, well, Lilith. Yeah, there is something very, you're very 8th house oriented, I've got to say. You might have Scorpio in the 8th house, or some of the planets like Pluto and so forth, or Venus in the 8th house. There's a very strong sense for you. And Aries, yeah, so it's like the deep sort of kind of drawing of energy and power and everything with power, like it's connected here. But it's connecting also to relationships, and that's what it draws in, a lot of like competition to you and so forth. People are a bit in awe of you, and probably with some good reason about your knowledge and so forth, but I do think that it creates, if you think about Lilith, she was the first woman and she was ultimately pushed out by another woman, and not having a go at Eve. I don't think there was anything necessarily wrong with Eve, but she was not given her due. There was sort of power dynamics that took. But the truth of the Goose Girl is the promise of that is the capacity to actually to rise above that. So don't feel this is saying you can't have what you want. It's just saying detach some of the elements so that you've got a better chance of not having people wanting to feed off you, to be frank. And the Explorer. Okay, so yes, so you are very comfortable in the 8th house. You're very comfortable in the depths, and that is part of what draws people to you, and it's ultimately part of what can make you rise above this and get the knowledge. You explore into these things. You're not afraid of the shadow and so forth. But the Explorer does need to travel a bit solo, and this, as I say, does not mean you can't be in a loving relationship, but it does mean that you need to strike out your own path rather than one that you think should be connected to somebody else. Let that be a byproduct of you being yourself and bringing in the wise choice, rather than continually sort of having this pattern of people trying to feed off you and be you that you have to continually detox and release from. So that's very interesting energy for you. So let's have a look with tarot at each element of this in turn. So we'll start actually with the intimate, and then we're going to look at the strategy, and then we'll have a look at the spiritual. So firstly, Spirit, a little bit more information for pile 1 about how their 8th house operates around intimate relationships. We've got the feeling that ultimately they could have a lot of wisdom around this and release energy, but there is a tendency for people to want to be them. So what else can you tell us about that and how they manage the best and most intimate relationships? Okay, so this is picking up an energy. I think that many of you, if you've come to the right reading, you're relating to this. You're relating to the fact that maybe one or more intimate relationships you had to sort of release and detox from because they ended up sort of taking a lot from you, taking a lot from your creative energy, taking a lot from your spiritual connectedness and your optimism. And they were hard work by the looks of things, and very controlling, and didn't want to give you recognition. I'm sorry, I have to tell you what this actually says, but it does look as though, I do feel this is a pattern and it's probably come even from childhood, so sort of more like family sort of stuff through to other relationships. But I think all that it is saying is that if you recognize that, you can let that sort of energy go. This is very much where you've put the love of somebody else ahead of your own identity. You've put passion ahead of your autonomy and so forth. And so one of the things that you need to work through with your shadow, as I say, is to get out of the grip of the sort of really intense relationships. I think one of the things it's saying is that because you are so intense, you probably draw intense people to you, and there's something incredibly intoxicating about that sort of dynamic. And the sense of, oh, maybe I found my sort of soul twin or something like that. But I feel like at the moment it's a false scenario. You actually have the wisdom, but you've got to, as I say, own your own wisdom, because at the moment you're getting the pretender to the throne. But it feels intoxicating to start with. But you'll know that's happening if they sort of whittle away at your sense of self, and they whittle away at your joy, and they don't recognize you. It's all about them. There's something like that that's coming up, because in a sense you're giving away some of your wisdom and some of your power when you really are meant to be a very powerful person. I get that sort of sense. They say that the darkness is attracted to the light. I think it's also true that weakness is often attracted to power. And so but they want to create, they want to take over the power. So knowing that this dynamic is partly because you are very strong. But as I say, that's why you almost need to disconnect the strength of your shadow energy and what you can go after in the world from what you want to love, and even from your spiritual thing. If you can disconnect these things, you're more likely to find the true love, the true energy, and so forth. So let's have a look at this side of things. So a little bit more information about what's happening for you around the sort of like the change energy, the life, death, rebirth, the strategy, other people's resources, any of those sort of things that come up in the power aspects of the 8th house. Okay, so this is very much Spirit doubling down on you should be your own person. You have a lot of potential with both the Warden and the Chancellor of Crystals, which is like the Queen and King of Pentacles. You, in the powers of the world, in resources, in strategy, you are on top of your game. You really are. This is probably why you're drawing the pretenders towards you. You don't have to have the other person, but if you do have the other person, they need to be truly like you. We need to almost have the King and Queen of Pentacles together. So one of the things to watch out for on this is the superficial similarity, possibly through spiritual beliefs, and look for the real, like what's going on in the real life, the real sort of structured life, because you are actually meant to be very successful in that world. And you have the capacity to go after what you want and have the ambition and all of that sort of thing. You need to meet an equal, and I think that's what this is saying. You're not going to meet an equal if you are putting what the sort of strangeness, the difference, like going, the difference is what's attracting me, or this person is spiritually sort of different. They may not be the same as me in life. There's more of a similarity you should be looking for, not what is different. And not what is spiritual, what is more material. That will actually help you, I think, because at the moment you know in a way that you could be something really spectacular in the material world, but you're a little bit worried about the competition and going out into it. And I just feel like people around you who are threatened by you are kind of eating away at your confidence a bit. So it's important to know what you have, and that you have the capacity to really build and invest on things. And you're already developed in that, it's saying, with the 7 of Pentacles. You're already well on your way. That might be what's drawing some of these pretenders to the throne for you. And they're kind of the one thing that can kind of destabilize your confidence. So it's like, think of yourself and then only a partner who is like you, who can meet you head for head. Because if it's more like, oh, this is this really interesting sort of spiritual person who's into the mysteries, but they're not like you in other ways, then they're after something from you, I think. Okay, so let's have a look at your spiritual journey. So what's happening here? Because you are very knowledgeable in this level, certainly, and it's probably part of what's helping you to manifest. But let's see how that's playing out in your 8th house. Okay. So this is suggesting for many of you that you could do something with your work that connects to your spiritual ability. And this might be, again, why they're kind of connected. It may be that in actual fact you're working on something spiritual. This is why when you have your ambition, you're going to be sort of connecting to the spiritual stuff, and then that goes through to your intimate relationships because you're sort of looking for that connection. So that may be part of the conundrum for you. Given that, it's important to have as much clarity as possible, and you are able to find it if you look for the power patterns, so this is like the Emperor reversed. If you are finding, as you get to know someone a bit better and as you get more information, that there's more and more power issues that you have to kind of let go of and deal with, or that they're taking some of the power from you, that tells you that it's more like the goose girl. If, on the other hand, they are helping you sort of come out into the world and show more of yourself and supporting that and helping you deal with old emotional patterns and let that go, then they're more likely to be this King or Queen of Pentacles, depending upon which one you identify with. So I think that it's basically saying, you have very strong psychic abilities, but I think that you may tilt towards, I understand, I have the knowledge, rather than understanding how strong your ability actually is. It's like you can really manifest and you haven't entirely connected the two. It's like you learn about the mysteries and all that sort of stuff, but you're not necessarily practicing the magic, for instance. But there is definitely a connection between your capacity to manifest in the world and also sort of occult things, and they can come out more and more, and your mysteries can come out more and more. But it is the key, understanding in this space the spiritual connections that you have with others, which ones help you release and come out and be more in yourself, and which ones are trying to subvert you or control you in some way. That way you can actually make the right decisions about where to connect and how to move forward with the energy of your 8th house. Okay, so let's have a look at your journey in the underworld in the 8th house. So we're going to sort of start with a couple of cards around some support for you around relationships. Then we'll have a couple that are around your spiritual gifts. And then we will have a couple around power and strategy. So starting first with energies that we're asking Spirit to tell that can help. And I think for you, help to kind of detach where you need to detach, so you have a better, higher level vision of who are the right people to be with you, who are the ones that will help you become more and more of who you are and will be a mutual connection, and which ones are wanting to kind of devour you that you need to kind of separate out from. So just a couple of cards firstly around your relationship energy and how to really work with that the best way in the 8th house. Okay. So one of the things this is saying, you are probably, if you don't have Scorpio in the 8th house, or Pluto in the 8th house, or Venus in the 8th house, you're likely to have quite a lot of Scorpio, or have a Scorpio sort of edge to you. Because certainly around relationships, you do need to go into the depths. You can't have a superficial relationship. And I think there is a part of you that's drawn to the strange and the different. And that could be okay if it's strange and different in the same way that you're strange and different. So we get that King and Queen of Pentacles. It's only when it isn't. But Spirit is saying don't be afraid of exploring in that realm, that you have the wisdom to deal with what you want, solutions in the unknown places in the darkness. And I think it's also sort of saying to kind of go within your inner knowing, the moon in a sense reversed there. Let your psychic energy start to sort of work for you. Don't just do it on a theory level, but do it to work for you, to work out, what are the right connections. Because this person, whoever it is who comes up as the King or Queen of Pentacles with you, does have to be strong and does have to be able to go to the depths too, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to handle you, to be frank. You're very, very intense and very, very powerful. The other part of it is to field of dreams. I think both of these are tilting towards dreams. I think that you will get a very strong sense with synchronicities and symbols in dreams around what is the true and authentic and what you do need to release. So what is the wise choice? What do you need to release? So very much go within that. Don't be afraid of that. Watch the cycles of the moon too. I think that you will get some real information and so forth to add to the knowledge that you have with actually opening up your abilities and so forth. So in some ways you're not wrong to have connected all these things. It's just that you need a higher level perspective about the interaction of it so you don't fall into the trap that can occur in connecting all of them, if that makes sense. So to help you with that, let's have a look at some spiritual energy and gifts. The 8th house, to add to the knowledge, because you definitely have the knowledge. Or this might show some knowledge as well too. We'll see what comes out. Scrying mirror projection. That's interesting. And crystal ball clarity. Okay, so I think this is saying, and so this is around what you can use your knowledge and your spiritual gifts and your psychic ability is to tell the difference between where you're projecting what you want into a relationship when you sort of find this strange Valentine and what is actually there, and when you have the clarity to say actually it is, I have the wisdom, this is the right relationship, I'm not at risk of being taken over. So I think it's saying that you need to understand that. You need to understand the balance of what's operating here, then you will be on top of it. But if you kind of ignore it and you just trust to spirit to provide, the right union, or even live into 8th house stuff where, love equals pain and love equals, the depths and love equals the shadow, which people can be a bit programmed to do with certain types of romantic novels and so forth. If you do that, then you're projecting a lot rather than getting the clarity. So let's get another couple of spiritual support cards for you. Aura, protect your boundaries. Yes, you do. You need to protect your boundaries. And shaman, mystical journey. But you can heal. Like that release, that detoxing, you are able to do it. You are able to go to the depths. You probably have shamanic abilities, actually. And it's probably part of what attracts you to all of this. It's just understanding what that means and why it's important to protect your boundaries. Okay, so then let's also have a look at the power and strategy. So we're going back to this point here. So just some energy around that in the 8th house, just a little bit more information for you. The Green Man. The Lady Grian, open your heart. Okay, so this is interesting. This is picking up fertility sort of things, the building of a business, the building of power in the world, all of those sort of things. And it definitely says that your nature is very well suited to all of that, to the cycles of life, to the issues of the 8th house, and to getting the outcome. It's picking up the 7 of crystals or pentacles, that your harvest is coming in many ways around that part of your life. Lady Grian is about new love coming in and about getting over the hurts of the past. So I'm sort of feeling like Spirit's sort of giving almost a dual message here. I think that they're saying that patterns that you have where you connect power, strategy, evolution with love and with what is different have put you in this scenario where you could have been sort of used or exploited in some way, or people sort of tried to become you or whatever. But I think they are saying that there is a new love potentially coming through that is connected with this. If you are with someone, then there's maybe a resurrection of that love or a reconnection with that if life and power and strategy is sort of separated it out a bit. Or if you are with someone and you say, well, actually, I have sorted that out. I did have that pattern before and I'm aware of not having it happen to me in the future, but I think I am okay with that. Then this is sort of saying that there will be a safety to open your heart. So I think that's, again, picking up the Pentacles energy as well, the King and Queen of Pentacles. I think you are meant to connect your power and strategy and change with your love and your intimacy and somehow have a connection around a similar spiritual thing. It's just getting the right person. Then you can open your heart. Okay, so to close out the reading, I want to get some astrology energy, broader astrology energy around your 8th house how the 8th house is working for you. And then we'll also use Astro Chakra cards just to bring it all together at the end. So what we're looking for here is sort of like some other sort of energy or issues astrologically that maybe impact on how you can best use the energies of your 8th house. Water. Waxing givers, clarifying direction. Yeah, that's very important. Mercury, good communication, using your mind, sorting it out strategically. And Scorpio. Like, I do think many of you may have Scorpio in the 8th, or Scorpio very strongly, or maybe a water sign in the 8th at the very least, because there is such a strong connection to the heart and the emotions around this, and such a depth going into the depths, as that card showed, and so forth. So I think that's Britta's saying, don't be frightened of that. That the real key thing is clear communication and having, clarified your direction and so forth. Then it's not so likely that people could take from you. It's more likely that you'll find the right person. And again, if you clarified your direction and opened up your scorpionic psychic ability, then you're not just about the knowledge associated with spirituality and the occult. You're actually a practitioner. You're actually able to draw in and therefore manifest what you want, which unlocks some of your innate power. Okay, so let's finish off with some Astro Chakra energy. Heart chakra, sacral chakra, heart chakra. So yeah, you are all about love. In your business and everything, it's about what you love. In your sort of intimate sort of thing, it's around sort of the wisdom and the connection and so forth, and the loyalty that ultimately wins out for love in that particular fairy story. So this is like having Jupiter and Venus conjunct. You will do well. You will have a good love. If you don't already, you will. And you will, in fact, I think, prosper through that. So your instincts of connecting them are right, as I say. It's just making sure that you've connected it to the right person. And that's where the Saturnian discipline in the sacral chakra, what you create, make sure that you feel it's responsible, and make sure that the people that you deal with are responsible and they're walking the talk. They're not just full of the knowledge. They're not just sort of full of, telling you that they love you while they're potentially being a bit vampiric, that there is a sense of responsibility. It may, for some, also say that you bring all this together fully when you're a little bit older. I don't know, you'll be at various ages depending upon who's looking at this. But with Saturn, it sometimes means that the full flowering of something comes in a little bit later in life. Don't mean 60 or 70 necessarily, but a little bit later than your first few years as an adult, for instance, is possibly the case, because there is a connection for you between power, responsibility and love, and there's some sort of bridge here around wisdom with spirituality. So I think Saturn is actually a welcome energy around your creative instinct and around your 8th house. So I hope that resonates for you, Pile 1. I do expect all these readings to be a little bit challenging because the 8th house is a little bit challenging, but it's also infinitely rewarding as well. And I think there's a lot of promise here for you. Hope you enjoyed the reading. If so, I hope I see you in other You Through the Houses episodes, as we do one a month to the end of the year to cover all 12 houses. And if you haven't, this is the first one you've seen, I have a playlist with the ones 1 through to 7 already in that playlist if you want to check out the others. Beyond that, I hope to see you in more general pick-a-card readings too. Welcome, Pile 2, to your reading. So these cards are to represent some of the 8th house energies around power, around resources, around resurrection, life and death, all the changes and cycles in the world, the powers of the world to a large extent. These cards are around spiritual areas for you, and these cards are around intimacy, the sort of really close personal love relationships and so forth. And there's an energy here that is a little bit blocked. I think there's an energy of kind of self-doubt or being concerned about who and what you would love and how and what you want to do spiritually, and what it means to have ambition in the world. There's a kind of both a drawing towards and an ambivalence about power, intimacy, and even the spiritual. So I think you're both fascinated by the elements of the 8th house and also a little bit scared by them, or scared may not be the right word, but wary of them to some degree. Because here in the powers of the world, strategy, other people's resources, all those sorts of things, we have a high degree of ambition. I think there is a sense that you want to achieve something, or you already have achieved something. But with Burnt by the Sun, it's sort of got this sort of sense of how far can you reach and what are the consequences of that. It's a bit like Icarus. This card always makes me think of Icarus, like the story of, flying too close to the sun, being burnt by the sun. It doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to be. It just means that I think you're thinking about it and you're trying to decide how powerful, how far you want to go in the world, because Two Little Witches is about a kind of clearing space, a magical clearing space where often the more routine and the more mundane and the more structured energy clears out for what it is that you're trying to achieve. This has a kind of Virgoan feeling. Some of you may have Virgo in the 8th house. Otherwise, it's sort of like, or Virgo and Leo almost. It's kind of like how those energies connect on that kind of depth level, and the change, like what's required to change and reach your ambition here. And what would you have to change in yourself? Do you believe in yourself enough to do it, and so forth? And do you really want it, what it is that you're potentially looking for? There's an ambivalence in this energy. There's also an ambivalence around spirituality and around the occult. On one hand, you very much want to set personal boundaries. You don't want to get too close to the shadow, the occult, the sort of like the spiritual, the mediumistic, all of that kind of thing. You're protecting yourself. But on the other hand, you're fascinated by that which is a bit taboo. You're more likely to be interested in things like high magic and ritual and that kind of practice than you are necessarily in sort of meditating and saying mantras. You're fascinated by the sort of the element of power and shadow and darkness, and not necessarily anything evil, but like that kind of element of the occult and the spiritual, but you're also wary of it, so you have a lot of protection. And then here around relationship, we have the Frog Prince from the Fairy Tale Oracle, and I like to use this oracle because I think it shows some imprinting often from stories when we were very young. And this is about a princess who has anything that she wants, basically. So she can have and is very beautiful and can draw in any love or anything that she wants. And then she comes across a frog who's actually a prince, and eventually she needs to kiss the frog to get the prince. But it's a card here that talks about what is your connection to intimacy. What is it that would make you feel that you wanted to connect? And again, there's an ambivalence because there's beautiful qualities to this frog prince, but there's also, because he's a frog, she's not necessarily seeing him in that light. And here we have the same thing where we have Freya with irresistibility, with this sort of real sense of like the unstoppable force, the passion, the intensity. But then Nuada, the god about perfection. So this was a god who had lost his arm in battle, and he wasn't able to be a leader until he had a fashioned arm, for him, because he had to be perfect. So it's kind of like, you want to be successful in the world and to sort of be able to deal with power and deal with it appropriately, but it's like, what is the effort? What is the cost of that, and how far do you want to go? It's like you want to get to the depths of the kind of like the occult and spiritual side of things and really go where other people might be afraid to go, but how do you protect yourself? And it's like, I really want an intimate relationship, I want closeness, but will I be perfect enough for it, or will they be perfect enough for it? If I draw the wrong people in with my irresistibility, should I even be contemplating it? There's just a really strong sense of the amount that these things matter to you, your ambitions in the world, your sort of spiritual growth, and also love, and I think they matter a lot, makes you just as nervous about committing to it as it is to embracing it. So there's a lot of dancing with the shadow, I think, energy for you around the 8th house. So let's have a look at the archetypes that connect, particularly to relationship, but more generally around the 8th house. So we've got Gemini, Aquarius, okay, and the sensualist. Okay, and here's the same ambivalence. Gee, you're interesting, Polto, I have to say, because on one hand, we've got everything's in the head. Everything's a matter of like, what's philosophically the decision? How far do I want to go? What do I think about it? I do want to sort of like explore the spiritual depths or whatever, but how do I kind of put it in a box and make sure it's fine? And then also, I want love, but what if I don't make the right choice? What if I get drawn to something irresistible, but the frog doesn't turn out to be a prince? Like what's going on there? So you want the kind of certainty, and it gives you a level of detachment with Aquarius where you kind of may come across as a bit aloof from all of this. Like some people might not think that you're very much driven by matters of the eighth house at all. I think in actual fact you're very drawn to all of it, but you have a kind of a cool exterior around it, and you kind of haven't worked out which mask to wear, which side. So it's more like an academic exercise to you than anything. But underneath everything, you're the sensualist. You want to sort of reach into the powers of the world to create something for yourself that gives the good life. You want to have the really strong connection, the irresistible draw to the one great love. You want to enjoy all the things that sort of spirituality, particularly on a sort of sensual and sort of experiential nature, could be. But you toggle between that in your head. So it's just a really interesting energy. Doesn't mean that you can't have the great love. Some of you may be in the great love. You may have already sorted through some of this, and this just might be about other close relationships. Some of you may have already achieved quite a high degree of power or success in the world, but now you're kind of thinking about what do I need to clear out for the next level and how far do I want to go. Some of you might have explored some very taboo or sort of like more shadowy aspects of sort of spirituality, and you've got some protection, but you're still kind of looking at what else. So it's not that you wouldn't do these things, but you're pushed and pulled in two different directions. So let's see what that means. It's interesting too that you chose the white fly tarot because that was the one connected to air. So there's very much a philosophy behind all of this for you. But we're going to ask three things. We're firstly going to ask about your intimate connections in the eighth house, a bit more information on that. Then about your sort of depth psychology, strategy, power energy, and then lastly around your spirituality, just to get a little bit more information about how your eighth house operates. You could be actually someone who has either, say, a very strong eighth house type water or fire sign, like water or fire signs in the eighth house, but then have things like Mercury or Saturn or things like that also there. So there's that same detachment. Like there's a little bit of an internal war. Anyway, let's have a look at a little bit more information about the intimate connection and the issues that you're dealing with there with the eighth house. Okay. So I tend to look at reversals more as suppressed energy than anything. So don't be too concerned when you see that coming out. You are very emotionally authentic. Like ultimately when you love, you truly love. So this isn't about not caring. It's almost about caring too much to the point that, it's then hard to bring it in because what if I make the wrong choice sort of thing. Because you're very true. When you connect your heart, you absolutely connect your heart. And that's why, if it turned out to not turn into a prince, so to speak, it would be sort of so heartbreaking. So I think one of the energies around this is your ambivalence comes from having extremely high standards about what you want and about what you want to give as well too. And you want to be perfect for the person as well too. You want to be irresistible as well. And you may sometimes feel that you're not understood or seen for what you could do. If the roles were reversed there and you feel a bit more like the frog, for instance, it might be, you don't feel that you have the right social standing, for instance, for the person that you love or something like that, where you're wondering about whether you will be seen as perfect or not. But there's a very genuine emotional energy that you're protecting. And ultimately, it's a sensible thing to do because what you're doing is releasing yourself from what would have been potentially negative relationships. So one of the things that Spirit is saying about this is that this does work quite well for you because you don't commit until you know it's authentic. You're not going to, much as you can feel very strongly, you have a degree of detachment that is necessary to navigate the really intense side of eighth house energies so that you don't become obsessive. People might become obsessed with you, but you're not going to. You're very clear on that. And you can look at things from different perspectives. So I feel like, you don't stay in this energy very long. And part of this cleaning out energy about how far you want to go, you are capable of sort of standing back and looking at things. So certainly from a relationship perspective, you will look at the unusual, the different. You may come across as having standards that have to be met, but in actual fact, you're quite open about how that might be done. But I feel that for most of you at the moment, you maybe haven't found the one you want to commit to, or you're thinking about whether or not you commit to a relationship that you're in at the moment. And you know that you need to kind of show your hand a bit more, either to come out from isolation if you've avoided relationships altogether, or to come out and be a little bit more open about, what you're looking for with someone if you're trying to decide if it's the right one. Okay, so let's have a look at the sort of psychology, strategy, powers of the world, energies of the 8th house in a bit more detail for you. Okay, this is looking pretty positive, actually. I do think some of you may move from a job or something like that, something to do with resources or whatever, or may take up some temporary sort of, lines of credit or resource or whatever. It's not necessarily the long-term thing. So many of you may be in a role or developing your sort of like power and strategy in the world in sort of something a bit temporary at the moment, but I think that's okay. It looks like it's going very, very well, and you have a real sense of your direction. Also, some of you may literally, around the kind of resurrection strategy energy of this, you could potentially be someone who helps with organisation, structural change, all that kind of thing. Could be very lucrative for you. But it looks like you've gone through, I think you've gone through this clearing out process. You've worked out how far you really want to go at the moment, what that might mean. And that might mean changes in what you do, or it might mean a step-by-step approach. But you've done that work. Most of the issues around your 8th house, around, is my ambition too high? What do I want to do? What would I be prepared to do it? You've kind of sorted that out. And it's very strongly connected to your spiritual understanding and a very, very strong instinct, spiritual instinct for knowing how to do that. So that's why I think that looks very good, even though there's sort of like a little bit of ambivalence about how far do I go. I think you have some clarity around all of this at the moment. So let's have a look at your spiritual journey, because that looks pretty interesting. That looks like you might be kind of drawn to some of the sort of, as I say, more shadowy or sort of interesting levels of occult knowledge and so forth. But you're also very well aware you have to be careful, which I think is wise. I think that's a good energy. But let's see what else we get. Okay. So I think picking up with the fact that we've got the High Priestess there, you're very psychic. Part of the reason that you have this ambivalence is that if you start to look into these things, you'll really get into them. And you do need to know, about boundaries and so forth and protections to do that. But I think your intellect is kicking in, and it's starting to show you what those could be and how to do it. You're kind of releasing some of your fear, bringing some of that into balance. I think that some of what you would want to do around your spirituality is very different to other people. Other people may not approve. You may have been in sort of like spiritual groups or whatever, and you're feeling that instead of like advancing what you're doing, it's actually dimming what you want to do. You want to explore something that doesn't have to be literally taboo, but something that is a little bit sort of like more kind of, as I say, ritualistic. And again, not in a bad way. I don't get a sense of anything bad here, but of like looking at the shadow, the scorpionic, the shadowy side of the occult, not the kind of warm, fuzzy, let's all be high vibrations. You're sort of the opposite of that. You're kind of, okay, I want to get to the depths, and you want to know how to not have other people interfere with that, and also how not to sort of dim your sun. But you have a lot of connection and a lot of optimism about this. I think you've worked out what you need to do with this. And you potentially, I think for some of you, have very strong connections to certain sort of starseed sort of energies as well too. And that might be part of what's drawing you towards this as well. So I think things are looking pretty good. I think the only area where there's potentially still stuff to kind of work through and sort through is around love. But I think that you've kind of sorted out what you want to do around spirituality, and you've come to peace with your progress and what you need to do kind of in terms of strategy, other people's resources, the powers of the world, and so forth. So let's have a look at your journey in the underworld that is being in the 8th house. And we're going to look firstly with a couple of cards for some extra information around relationships. Then we're going to do a couple that pick up your spiritual gifts, the ones that you're particularly using here, and then we'll pick out a couple that are also looking at your sort of power strategy, sort of what energy are you moving to there. So firstly, around relationships. Forgiveness, okay. And the Golden Phoenix. Okay, all right, so for some of you, there's a very specific message here I'm going to say first, which is that for some of you, there may have been a love that you were close to that you rejected or you felt rejected by, one or the other, with that story about who was perfect, who was the right one. But it's a very irresistible, very close connection, and it looks like it's coming back because we've got the Golden Phoenix, something you thought finished, bursts back into life, and then forgiveness. It requires forgiveness. So I think for some, that part of your life is going to be sorted out fairly soon by the return of someone or the rekindling of someone. If there isn't that in your life, or if that thought fills you with horror because the past people were just not the right people going forward, then I think you have to forgive yourself for anything that's been going on so that you can sort of arise like the phoenix to be ready to come back out into the world and to show your true heart. So it just depends on whether you fit that very specific first message or it's the more general one. Let's have a look at some gifts for you, spiritual gifts that help you, I think, navigating this sort of more in-depth or depth level spirituality that you're drawn to. Candle illumination. So candle magic might be something that you use, but it's also, I think, yes, having the illumination in the dark, knowing that you have the boundaries that you need to be able to look into the areas, the underworld areas that other people would maybe be frightened to look at. And wishbone, affirmation. So affirmations and, like that kind of boundary work might be really helpful for you. And an affirmation that it's okay. I think Spirit is saying you're not going to go and do anything wrong or anything really bad. You're exploring who you really are. Let's get another couple of cards for you. Haunted house, banishing unfounded fears. So yeah, if you have fears around this, you will be able to be illuminated in the dark. You will be able to deal with this. You're stronger than you think. Some of you may have very strong mediumship type of abilities with that card coming up in, around the 8th house as well. And you might feel that's a bit taboo, coming from whatever background you came from. But you do have that kind of ability, I think. And UFO, keeping secrets. Okay. So some of you might look into sort of, the mystery schools, secret societies, all that kind of thing as well too, with taboo. And if that's the case, you can do that. I also think that some of you have starseed connections. So there may literally be some channeling of information to you that way. So lastly, let's have a look at a couple of cards around sort of power, strategy, other people's resources, those sort of energies for you. And these are all just, advice from Spirit around the pathways of these things for your 8th house. The Fairy Norn. And the Web of All Life. Okay. Okay, so firstly, the Fairy Norn, I feel, fits very much with the energy of the Two Little Witches. It's about planning, patience, it's about cooperating with others. It's really just about clearing out all that energy and working out, what do you do on your own and what do you do with others and how do you plan and prepare. So I think it's affirming the sort of sense that you are moving in the right direction around resources and power and strategy and so forth, but possibly connecting with others is going to be helpful for that. And certainly to keep that sort of sense of there is the grand ambition, but there is also the kind of routine and the structure that's necessary to bring that into being. And Chamara with Web of All Life, that to me feels like power in the matrix, literally, because I always think of the matrix a bit being like a web. I think it's also the sort of connection to ancient knowledge and so forth as well. That is somehow connecting you across, and maybe across sort of dimensions as well towards, knowledge of what you can be and who you can be and so forth. It's interesting as well too, I'm getting, even though the Phoenix was about relationship and we got burnt by the sun and then Icarus, there is a real sense of fire around you. So some of you may have fire also strongly in the 8th house. But there's something about the sort of fiery creative energy as well, and the connectivity to others that I think is part of you really maximizing what you can do in terms of power, strategy, change, resurrection, all of those sorts of energies that are part of the 8th house. Okay, so to finish off, I want to firstly get you some broad astrology energy about how best to use the energies of your 8th house, and then we'll use Astro Chakra to bring it together. The 9th house, that's interesting. Mercury, the 3rd house, and conjunction. We'll have a look at the planets that are conjunct. So 9th house and 3rd house suggests that there are avenues to maximizing your abilities and everything that you want to do in terms of 8th house energy by utilizing the energies that are true of the 9th house and the 3rd house. So the 3rd house has Mercury as its planet. So this is very much saying how you communicate in the world is very important to bringing in the love that you want, to exploring the depths and the heights of your spiritual ability, and to creating whatever level of ambition you want. There's something about the connection to the 3rd house, and planets that are in your 3rd house will be important. Similarly with the 9th house. So the 9th house gives it a higher level strategy to it. It picks up that Aquarian sort of energy. But it also suggests that higher learning is something that will help you both in terms of the resources and power of the world, and also in navigating these other things, understanding the philosophy and higher learning, and possibly travel around this as well too will be important to one or more aspects of maximizing your 8th house. So let's also see what planets are conjunct. Neptune. So that's all your psychic and spiritual abilities. Neptune and the moon, oh yeah, very psychic. You're very psychic. So it's this sort of mediumship, the sort of sense of being able to go into the sort of deeper elements of the sort of other worlds and so forth. Very much is very, very strong and very strongly connected to your emotional life. So that Queen of Cups, that emotional authenticity, it's, tapping into your spiritual ability will bring that in for you. Okay, so let's finish off with just 3 Astro Chakra cards. Solar plexus, yeah, power. You are meant to be powerful, I think, in one form or another, and spiritually strong. Okay, so this is like having Uranus and Mercury conjunct in your solar plexus chakra, so around power, who you are in the world, quite revolutionary, quite change oriented, very strong communicator. So that's part of what helps. This is also why planning is important, because when you have Uranus energy, that definitely sort of can be kind of move fast and not think. So it's balancing that with your mind helps you really create the best out of your 8th house. And Mercury is also important around what you channel and connect to spiritually in the crown chakra as well. So stopping for a minute sometimes and just contemplating is helpful. Don't rush to decisions. Listen to your inner knowing. So I think you've got a very, as I say, very interesting ambivalent energy, but there is definitely a way of balancing this out. And I think Spirit is saying you're well on your way to balancing it out. And then a lot of that kind of like the ambivalence will disappear, because you will know that you're strong enough to deal with anything that you come across from the 8th house. So I hope that resonates for you, Pile 2. I hope you enjoyed it. If so, please like and subscribe, and I hope I see you in future episodes, 1 a month until the end of the year, to cover all 12 signs now that we're up to the 8th house. And if this is the first one of this type of the series that you've seen and you enjoyed it, I do have the houses 1 to 7 already in a playlist, so you can watch those as well. Beyond that, I hope I can see you in more general pick a card readings as well. Welcome, Pile 3, to your reading. So to start the reading, these 2 cards relate to the kind of change energy, resurrection, power in the world, sharing of resources, strategy type of aspects of the 8th house. These 2 relate to the spiritual and the occult aspects of it in particular, and these 3 connect to a pattern or an energy in your 8th house around relationships. So I think for you, that the 8th house journey is a journey of understanding your own power and moving into it. And I think you are sort of someone who is drawn to challenges and to chaos and to intensity because on one level or another you know internally that is what will bring in your power and who you really are. But I think that it plays itself out on two levels and then eventually finds its home around spiritual gifts and really, as this says, revealing your gifts and becoming in praise of them and not being frightened of them, because I suspect you are actually very, very spiritually gifted, very, very occult gifted indeed. So magically gifted, that kind of thing. But I think it's sort of, as I say, it's like the eighth house, first of all, plays out in other areas. And I think kind of in two areas that are a bit separate, but they kind of connect as well. So in one hand, here around strategy, change, other people's resources, we have the fairy of the green world, which talks about how the natural world needs your assistance. There's something about what you could bring, resources you can bring, and also how you can use resources and also honor resources. So when you're talking about the natural world and its resources, your attitude to that is very important, but you kind of see on almost nightmare scenario playing out. So I feel like you are very, very environmentally conscious, very, very responsible. You want to come up with sort of a way of better using resources. And if it isn't around the environment, then it's around the sharing of resources and so forth. So there's a political aspect, a social justice aspect, that kind of thing to the energy that you bring to the eighth house. When you look at this at the deepest level around the sharing and the use of resources, you want a responsible approach, but you're not seeing it in the world. And I think that's more broadly in the world, though it could also be in your most sort of close people and so forth. There's an issue around that you deal with, that you almost have a sense of doom around it, but then on the other hand, you do think there could be a solution. So that's operating around that sort of thing, and you're highly responsible. That same sense of, there could be doom and frightening things involved or risks and so forth plays out around how you see the most intimate relationships. So it's interesting, you get the Red Riding Hood card from the Fairy Tale Oracle. I like to use this oracle because I think fairy tales are very strong indications of sort of like symbolic morality tales that we learn when we're young that have quite a strong imprinting essence on us. And Red Riding Hood is the archetypal rites of passage, finding your way through the dark forest, having the predatory wolf after you, but at the same time using your ingenuity, your cleverness and your understanding to defeat the wolf and get to your grandmother's house. That kind of sort of sense of, intimate relationships are very appealing and they draw you in, but they're also a little bit risky, is the sort of energy of that, and of learning how to navigate that. And then you have set, chaos, so this sort of sense that there can be a kind of chaotic revolutionary thing, so that even if something is a bit risky, there is a lot of rebirth and regrowth, very scorpionic energy around intimate relationships, but maybe drawn to that which is a bit chaotic, which is a bit unclear, because you like to use your strategy. So it's sort of like you're attracted to the more complex, intense, and possibly hard to pin down relationships because they test your ingenuity and you're testing yourself out. And I think certainly around your intellect, but also around your intuition, because then this sort of process of like dissatisfaction with what's going on in the world and a kind of attraction to the most challenging around intimacy leads you to your spiritual strength, to revealing your gifts. So in these solutions you come up with that I think are quite pragmatic in this space, and the capacity to outwit and deal with that which is chaotic in the intimate relationships, you start to understand your gifts and you start to sort of feel praise for yourself and for those gifts. So it's like you learn how to use this because of the problems that you almost draw yourself towards. So it's very interesting energy. Let's have a look at the archetypes that are playing out, particularly around intimacy, energy around the eighth house, but more generally as well. Okay, so we've got King, Empath, and the Pioneer. Okay, so I think this King energy is here. I think you're meant to lead out. You'll be a solutions person about resources. Very, very, and I always think with this particular archetype card, very gentle, very strong, caring, nurturing sort of energy. And with the Empath, can really pick up. I think you're highly empathic, so you can read a room and read a situation. It can make you go towards the sort of more Heathcliff than the Mr. Darcy, let's put it that way, kind of energy. But then on the other hand, you very strongly do draw energy and you're very empathic. So that's part of your sort of spiritual gifts. but there's definitely this sort of sense of responsibility and wanting to do something new. And this is also the bravery. The pioneer archetype is incredibly brave and goes out into the areas that other people won't go out into. So I think you do have a pioneering spirit about you when it comes to intimate relationships. And I think the same pioneering spirit will help you reveal your gifts. So I just think it's sort of through a balance of wanting to do something responsible in the world and also being drawn to sharpening the ingenuity and strategy to find the really intense relationship where you can balance chaos with strategy and therefore outsmart the wolf but find the right person in the woods, so to speak. That takes you to your spiritual gifts. So very interesting energy, very sort of deep sort of patterning and kind of very self-aware in many ways, I think. So let's have a look with astrology. Let's look at tarot for each of those elements. So we'll start with intimacy in this case, and then we'll go to the sort of the psychology and the other people's resources and that kind of thing, and then we'll have a look at spirituality. So firstly, for pile 3, show us a little bit more, Spirit, about how the 8th house works for them around intimate relationships. Okay, so it definitely does suggest that you sometimes get drawn to the chaotic. It's almost like you're trying to heal something within yourself around intimacy and love and so forth that kind of bleeds over into what you want to do for the world as well, that sort of sense of injustice. You may have been in relationships where, although you've probably ultimately come out on top, it's taken its toll. And so I do think there is a thing here around what Spirit is saying. Ask yourself, what emotional sustenance are you really getting from going into the more chaotic, the less just, the less clear type of situations? Are you drawn to this to prove something about yourself that you don't need to prove? You know, with the 2 of Swords, you've already proven it. You already know it, because all it's doing potentially is sapping your energy. You should be looking for the connections that make you feel at home, that make you feel safe, that make you feel warm, that make you feel recognized. So I do think there is a little bit of, are you still looking in the wrong place for love, because it is so intense and it is such a test to yourself. I think Spirit is saying you've already passed the test. That's not meant to be the focus now, because if you now focus more on your spiritual journey, you'll end up finding a similar intense relationship, but one that is the right one and that meets you for strategy, and it has the same sort of sense of moral responsibility, because you're very moral, you're very responsible. So let's have a look at that then at the kind of level of sort of responsibility and power and strategy. Okay, there's a bit of a push-pull energy here, I must say. So I think that you're on a bit of a mission around all of that sort of stuff at the moment. You've definitely got a sort of vision, but you haven't fully completed it and brought it to fruition, whether it's a creative approach, whether it's political, whether it's sort of something in a workplace, whatever it might be, you know, or whether it's even just articulating it yet enough to draw in other people's resources or other supports. There's a sense. There's also with this a sense of a time clock around the world. So I do think that some of you are very environmentally concerned. But there's a releasing energy coming through. There's a solution coming through that is unconventional. You are not going to do just what everybody else did before. You are responsible. You have a sense of, you know, what the world is, but you do need to sort of shift things somehow, and you have the energy to do it. So you're definitely going to have an impact around things like strategy. You can throw the rule book out when necessary and get things into balance and so forth, and free energy. But there's something at the moment around this that you haven't fully kind of realized yet or completed yet. So, but I think, you know, for most you're on the brink of doing something. And I think it's sort of like a breakthrough there or a breakthrough there. One or other comes from you realizing something about your spirituality. So let's have a look with a little bit more detail around what Spirit wants you to focus on around your spiritual journey with the 8th house. Okay. So yeah, you haven't fully realized your gifts yet. You may even have grown up with the Emperor reversed and the Hierophant reversed in very traditional sort of spiritual groups or whatever, or very scientific. So the concept of the spiritual side of things was quite suppressed in some way. And and you may have been around certain spiritual groups or whatever, but found that they were highly competitive and exhausting to some degree. It's sort of, you may even have been drawn to spiritual groups that were a little bit in chaos and all about that kind of intensity and energy rather than what you could do with it. So ones that were sort of obsessed around sort of like dysfunctional relationships, for instance, and it actually has drawn energy away from you and power away from you. So you need to make a decision about that sort of thing. You're not at this point really fully on your path spiritually. But I do feel that the things that are going on in these two elements of your life are meant to push you towards this and understand it. So I think you're closer to getting there probably around this side of things, around strategy and so forth. So thinking about your spiritual gifts and how they may help you around your attitude to resources and responsibility may be the key. Because you're either maybe avoiding relationships now, or you're in one that's so intense that it may be a little bit difficult to fully get that level of detachment that would let you really see what your gifts were. Okay, so let's get a little bit more information on those sort of things. So we're going to sort of start off with a couple of cards around the 8th house relationship energy to sort of see, since you are drawn to the very intense, to see where you are now and what spirit would suggest for you around your 8th house intimacy issues. Bondage. Okay, all right. Get another card from another. Oh, this came up for another one. Deep, dark sea, mermaid. So it is saying the solutions are in exploring this and finding your strategy and finding your way out. That is definitely part of your, I guess, life path to get to the depths and to look at the intensity. But at the moment, you kind of look like you're a bit tied up in it, like tied up either in a very intense, chaotic sort of relationship, or you kind of have been a bit burnt out by all that sort of thing, or you haven't fully worked out that to be constantly wanting to prove yourself in terms of your strategy is another way of tying yourself to chaos. It's like you've got to have a reason, a journey. Why did Red Riding Hood go into the forest? She went to see her grandmother. If you're going in to just meet the wolf, then you could be bound to it. It's good to be able to go into the dark. It's good to be able to go into the intense, but make sure it's for the right reason. Okay, let's look at your spiritual gifts, because I do think understanding your spiritual gifts and connecting into them can free that sort of energy and give you more protection when you're looking into the more intense. Because I think you always will be in intense relationships. You're not sort of someone for the casual relationship. Let's have a look at your spiritual gifts now that Spirit would like you to think about. Fortune cookie, fortuitous. So you can bring good luck in, and you can bring, because of that responsibility you have, you can actually manifest things. I think that's why Spirit's saying it's something probably more in the powers of the world and the resources of the world that starts to really give you the aha moment around your 8th house energies. And smoke, prayers. Okay, so I think prayers, connecting in praise, prayers, higher order beings around you, God himself, or herself, however you want to call it, the divine, all of that kind of thing, connecting into that will help you, particularly, I think, around the sort of more relationship challenges. Let's get another couple of cards from another spiritual deck. Crystal power, focusing your energy. So yeah, I think focus it on sort of the material world at the moment. And crystal ball, planning the future, yeah, so that you can plan, so that you can actually put some material things into place. It's going to prove it to you. That's what it's got to do, because I think you're trying to prove your power through just being in really complex relationships. It's probably easier to prove your power in the material world, understand your spirituality, and then you'll navigate that better. Okay. So then let's also look at the power and strategy side of things, since this seems to be an area where you could have a real breakthrough, pile 3. Elf-struck, enchanted, beguiled, enspelled. Okay. And Oroki, boundaries. Okay, so I think it is saying that there is a little bit of the sort of issue for you in the material world as well, which is probably why the nightmare card is there and why you're sort of like a little bit dissatisfied with what's going on. You are needed there, but you come across some of the similar shadows that you do there, because you can get a little bit awestruck by the kind of the complex and the chaotic. So I think this is just saying, don't let that happen. Don't bring that energy of wanting chaos into this area. There's enough going on in the world as it is. You can certainly find something that you can focus your energy and your responsibility on. Don't sort of just translate that energy over there. Set up some boundaries. Know what you are prepared to do and what you are prepared to share and what you expect from others. So yeah, I think that there's definitely here something where the challenge is like a scent on the wind to you. You kind of get drawn to it, but I think Spirit does want you to really think about, why are you using your strategy? What is it for? What's your goal? So to help with that and to close out the reading, we're going to look at some astrology energy for you around your 8th house more generally, and then the Astro Chakra cards. So we've got square. We'll have a look at the planets involved. Fire. 10th house, yeah, it's definitely saying career and things like that is a way to focus it. And sextile. So some things are going to be more dynamic and difficult, or at least call to action, and some things are going to be easier than you expect. Let's have a look at what planets are for each of those. So for the square, we have Saturn and Neptune. Okay. So your ideals and your sense of responsibility bring you into dynamic action. I think this is why it's saying, in fact, the square is operating very well here. This is why it's the space where you really start to achieve something from the 8th house. If you can keep those things in balance, if you don't get too depressed about your ideals by Saturn, and you don't get too head in the sky and enchanted and not see the details, if you can get that action operating, it is you bringing that sense of responsibility to your ideals. And that will show you how strategic you are. Okay, let's have a look at the sextile. Can take a little while to find planets, so just bear with me. Got Jupiter, that's lovely, and sextile to anything, it's lovely. Jupiter and Chiron, yeah, and there's a great deal of healing and abundance that comes from that. You heal first in one space, you learn how clever you really are, and then, and how spiritually attuned you are, and then that helps you heal some of the energies, I think, over in the sort of more intimate side of your relationships. So to finish off, I'll just draw 3 Astro Chakra cards. So just move that down a bit so that you can see it. Sorry about the ring light. So we've got love, so the heart chakra, the sacral chakra, and the intuition. So there, you're sort of like your psychic ability. And to have the moon in your 3rd eye shows how psychic you really are. That's it. This is what's going to prove it to you, and it's going to reveal your gifts. And then you'll be able to create abundance for yourself and be more honest about what's going on. Honest with yourself as well too, about what are you trying to create here? What do you want to create out of the chaos? And I think a lot of that is about love. Love for the earth, love for responsible people and others, love for your spiritual self, love in an intimate level with Venus brings it into harmony. So I think it's just saying that you can actually achieve these things. It's I think tilting towards using the energy of your practical self and healing what it is that would mean to be abundant for you. And then you can balance off the energies of your 8th house. So I hope that resonates for you, Pile 3. I hope you enjoyed the reading. If so, please like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And I hope to see you in future episodes of this series, which will be, once a month through to the end of the year till we've covered the 12 houses. If this is the first one of the series you've seen, I've done houses 1 to 7 already, and they're in a playlist. So check them out if you enjoyed this. And beyond that, I hope to see you in more general pick-a-card readings as well. Welcome, Pile 4, to your reading. So these 2 cards represent for your 8th house energies, things around change, revolution, strategy, other people's resources, the powers of the world, how that aspects in the 8th house. These 2 are picking up energies around your spiritual or occult leanings within the 8th house, and these 3 are around intimacy. And I did say at the beginning I thought these readings would go deep, and because the 8th house is a kind of deep and tricky house, and I think that is true of this reading. It looks to me like you either have a pattern of ending up in relationships that are intense but very troubled, problematic, maybe not fair, maybe that end up in battles, or maybe where you are sort of beguiled in and then they turn out to be more like a competition. The reason I say that is we've got the poisoned apple as the fairy tale oracle card, and that card points to where someone is beguiled. Literally, the evil queen wanted, I think it was Snow White, to eat the poisoned apple so that she would die. So there's a kind of a jealousy and a kind of a competition. I think that you may actually be very attractive, I think, to people, and therefore people might be competing with you all the time, both around who gets the person that you might both be interested in, or around even within a relationship having been brought into it. Then there's sort of some kind of almost like warrior kind of energy, and always trying to bring things into justice and so forth. So I think you battle a bit with the strongest intimate relationships. I think that you have a very strong personal power and seductiveness, but that draws a certain energy to you, and you may be fascinated by that sort of energy. You may even have learned early in the piece that somehow you had to fight for love. Maybe in your childhood you didn't get it. There was, neglect from parents or something like that. There might be a justice that you're trying to bring into balance through an intimate relationship, but you have a tendency to draw in this more competitive energy, maybe because you're repeating that pattern. In any case, there is a sort of the 8th house edge of intimacy for you. I think you need to look at it about where power and where the honesty with it is in question, so that you make sure you connect to the right people. And it's a similar energy across the others, because here around spirituality, it is saying let love grow, let love in. So you are meant to love, but you've sacrificed. Like, I feel like you've sacrificed for love over and over, like in intimate relationships, and I think possibly way back from childhood and so forth. I just think there's an imprinting where you're associating love and intimacy and caring and all of that sort of thing with some sort of battle. Like I think of that Pat Benatar song, Love is a Battlefield. It feels like that sort of energy. And I think that even like spiritually, you want to bring in the love, but you feel like, what's the sacrifice? What's the price of that? So there's almost a sense even around letting your occult or spiritual abilities in, that somehow you have to give something to get something. And you want to develop those things, but you sort of worry about the price of it on some level. And for some of you, you may have been around occult practices that were quite ritualistic as well, and you want to bring in something healthier. Here with the powers of the world, other people's resources and so forth, you kind of know that you can bring money in, you kind of know you can be someone in the world, but you feel like you've been like through a series of sacrifices and battles that you're almost disappearing like the ghost of the pumpkin patch. This card always talks about understanding how much strength you really have and so forth, so that you don't, almost by a self-fulfilling prophecy, sort of disappear from view from people. You need to open up your primal energy, because it is significant. Like, you are very attractive. You are very much someone who would draw people in on all elements of life, but it's like something taught you that there was a cost to all of this. But it may be in the sort of material ends of the 8th house, that bringing your primal energy in and connecting to that and letting that in, letting the love grow for that, rather than thinking there's always a price, might be the thing that both resurrects your sense of being in power in the world, and also which takes you out of this pattern of being maybe embattled by intimate relationships. So let's have a look at what archetypes are also around your 8th house. Friend and beauty. Yeah, okay. And the sage. Okay, all right. So I do think that there's something very attractive about you, whether it's sort of like that you're conventionally very beautiful for your culture, or whether it's just something very, very beguiling, very, very attractive about you. And I think it draws in jealousy. I think it also from friends, but I also think that often you would want to be a friend rather than close, but other people want to beguile you in, and you may find yourself battling for where you sit. I do think that you have frenemies and that sort of thing because of that energy. And, that And you have to kind of find the balance for that, like that, how many people you draw in. So it's interesting because here you feel almost invisible, but like on the field of love, you really draw people in, but you've kind of learnt that there's a cost to it and so forth. So it's like getting in touch with the balance of the friendship energy and the beauty energy that you have. And you do have the wisdom, like there's a lot in your spiritual background and your spiritual beliefs that could help you with the sage. You can do that. But I think it's a very primal level. It's like working out what was this sacrifice that you felt you had to make. And why was that wrong? Because I don't think you were meant to make that sacrifice. How can you let the love and the energy come back in your primal self? Your wisdom, your sage energy comes from getting to the primal levels, which you're living out at the moment around intimate relationships. But if you bring it more into your spirituality and into who you are in the world, then I think you can shift some of this energy as well. But there is a challenge for you, I have to say. So let's get a little bit more information on that. Let's use tarot and let's have a look at, firstly, around your love life, around intimacy. Start with that first. Then we'll have a look at spirituality, and then we'll have a look at the powers of the world. So firstly, the 8th house energy, a bit more information for pile 4 about their 8th house energy around intimacy and the closest love relationships. Yeah, there you are, the really, really attractive person. Really, you really are. Whether you realize it about yourself or not, you really are. And this is where a lot of this dynamic is coming from. And it draws in people who want to be the king to your queen, really, or the emperor to your queen. And this doesn't have to be about gender. It's just about energies. So, but there's definitely, but that's also potentially the power struggle, the Emperor, Aries, that kind of sense of, because of how brightly you shine, do you draw in this sort of competition? Do you draw in the war and so forth? And how do you get the justice? So you're not feeling the justice is really there at the moment with the Ace of Swords reversed. Now, an ace is always a blessing. So it is saying you have the capacity because of who you are to turn that around. But you've got to understand where you're being told untruths and where people are trying to influence you in some way. There's a lot of burden that's just put in debate and that kind of thing. And it could be from intimate partners, but it could also be from friends and so forth. There's just, you kind of keep carrying a lot of burden, and it's hard for you to focus on what it would be to bring things into balance. But a lot of it you have to focus on what you're hearing, what the communication is around you. That's the key for you. So let's have a look at the spiritual end, because maybe the spiritual sort of channeling or whatever, if you can let the love in and let go of this sense of sacrifice, maybe that will help clarify some of this for you. Okay, so it's definitely saying through the spiritual awareness and letting the love in is a big part of fixing everything for you. You can start to plan and manifest what you want. You have all the ability to do that. You really do. But it's interesting, we started with the Hangman, which is the card of sacrifice, amongst other things. It is also a different perspective. So I think that Spirit is asking you not to think that you have to sacrifice everything for this power and this manifestation. It's almost like you were taught that, what you could potentially create in the world through your spiritual ability was somehow wrong, that you shouldn't do that. It was a misuse of things. But in actual fact, you're much more pure than that. And if you kind of go from your heart and then you sort of think about it in the material world, the magician has what they need. You have what you need to do this. But there's letting go of the patterns of sacrifice. And look, I'm getting that for some of you, it might be, that you're very good at something like this, you read cards, you do something like that. And part of that sacrifice is you're constantly at the beck and call of others. You might need to let go of some of that and be able to have some boundaries for yourself, because you seem to be drawn into, with the Page of Swords reversed and the Five of Wands reversed, sort of petty stuff. Like there's petty battles. Like by and large, most of the battles that you find yourself in, whether it's with significant others or whether it's with friends who are jealous of that, is very petty. So letting go of that sense that you've got to be there for everybody else would be helpful. You're meant to step into your own power. Okay, so let's look at, speaking of power, let's talk about power and also the resources of others and strategy and all of that kind of thing around the 8th house for you. Okay. So Nine of Swords is making me think of the ghost of the pumpkin patch. You are worried beyond what you need to be. Nine of Swords is always where we worry more than we need to. Just like the Eight of Swords is we're actually trapping ourselves with our minds. Nine of Swords, we always worry more than is actually the case. So if you have a fear that you're going to kind of like disappear from view in terms of the priorities of the world, that doesn't have to happen at all. There is something you're trying to sort of start or build on a material level, and remember, you have, through your spiritual ability, the capacity to manifest, so you can do something with that. If you stop worrying so much about it, you can actually do something about it. All that creative energy will come through, and then you can manifest. So the Magician, I mean, if this is your energy, if we take out the Aries sort of battle with partners, but we make it about your energy, the Emperor energy, the Magician energy, and the King of Pentacles, you are meant to get to that primal level and create something and be something in the world. So that side of the 8th house would be very, very strong for you, and I think is something that might help you recalibrate this energy. It's just a matter of like backing yourself, because at the moment you don't have the confidence that you should have. But I think it's because of all this petty rubbish, and I think it's because people are jealous of you. Okay, so let's have a look at what Spirit wants to say about each of these areas in terms of energy right now that could help you. So we're going to start with a couple of cards around dealing with intimate relationships, those closest personal relationship energies. Little Owlin, wisdom as light as a feather. Okay. And resolution. Okay. So for a start, little Owlin here, like using your wisdom, you know, and that's picking up Mart's justice rather than just being in war, and what you can create, I think, in the world, and understanding that you don't have to sacrifice everything. This all helps you to get the sage. See, I feel like the owl here connects with the sage and the wisdom and so forth. So you really do have wisdom around getting to the heart and getting to what is light as a feather. If you think about it, like Mart, you know, when you're sort of in your life review, is weighing your heart against, you know, feathers, literally, to see whether your heart is light enough to therefore be seen as spiritually developed. So I think there's something in that about using that wisdom of feathers, of being as light as a feather, and the sage to understand what you can do in this space of your life, because you need to resolve something. There's a pattern going on. And it's sort of like, you know, here we've got the sort of dragon energy, and the person's sort of like kind of almost like trying to subdue it. So there's nothing wrong with your degree of attractiveness and irresistibility and all that kind of thing. And your sense of justice is very finely honed. But you are drawing in a dragon energy that's fighting with you. You need to be able to balance that off, bring out the Aries in you, the Emperor in you, rather than having it come towards you in intimate relationships. So it is about understanding your power. A power of attractiveness, and also power more generally. So let's have a look at some cards around spiritual gifts, because we know you're the sage. So let's see what else we get. Palmistry, interpretation. Yeah, it is all a matter of interpretation, actually. This could also say that you would be good at something like palmistry, so it's worth looking at if you haven't. But I think it's also saying that how you interpret what goes on is a key to this, that using that wisdom, understanding the patterns, rather than taking it all in on yourself and feeling like you have to sacrifice and you always have to be in battle. And then dice, gamble. So take some risks when you need to, back yourself when you need to. Spiritually, you're very well advanced. It's not really a risk at all. Let's use another deck for some other spiritual gifts for you. Time travel, finding the right timing. You might be able to astral travel and things like that, lucid dream with that, but certainly this is also about the strategy and getting things in balance and so forth. And Pegasus, making fantasies a reality. So you should be drawing in what you want here, not responding to everybody else's wants. And you get to that primal level and work out what love means for you. You can bring that in. You can give it wings. So again, you've got like feathers and wings, you know, that sort of sense of momentum. Okay, so let's have a look at what that might look like if you get to your primal self rather than sort of like hiding in the background a bit because of all the sort of, as I say, kind of petty rubbish you have to deal with. Let's have a look at what that might look like using the energies of the 8th house best on that level for you. This came up for another one, boundaries, and I definitely think you do need to have boundaries. Because the same sort of thing that's playing out here could play out around sort of the resources of others and the powers of the world and change in the world. It could be that you feel that you're always being overshadowed, but if you can get to yourself, primal self, and have some boundaries, you can help yourself with that. And the hedge witch, her wisdom, secrets, hidden law. So trust your inner knowing, trust the sort of spiritual knowing that you have, trust your manifestation, witchy sort of ability. You really can get to that primal level, have the right boundaries, and come out on top. So back yourself a bit more, I think, is the main message here. Let's get some astrology energy for you more generally around the 8th house, and then we'll finish off with some astro chakra cards. So Venus, so the love thing you really do need to think about. Mercury, think about and get the right communication going. Capricorn, and then doing something in the powers of the world, the resources of the world, and bringing in your manifestation. And Gemini, again, like the communication, how you communicate, and being able to wear different masks if you need to navigate some of this, because you are going to attract, as I say, this sort of frenemy energy and that kind of thing. And sometimes we just need to have a mask that's going to work in the situation so that you don't get drawn into battles you don't need to be in. Okay, so to finish off, let's get 3 astro chakra cards for you. And the sacral chakra, the third eye chakra, and the sacral chakra. So you're meant to be far more creative, far more primal, far more who you are, dealing with sort of the beauty of your creativity and the beauty of you more than you're maybe giving yourself license to do at the moment. This is like having the moon and the sun in the sacral chakra. So that is like your life path and your emotions connecting, that it is important. This is why what's playing out here, and to some degree also in your spirituality, is also playing out in your intimate relationships and vice versa. Getting those things into balance is important. There's a great blessing associated, I think, with the sun and the moon being conjunct, and particularly, say, in the sacral chakra, where you can create something for yourself, because that is like the alchemical marriage. It is like the marriage of the sun and the moon. It could presage the right divine union, not the one that is sort of like putting you in battle, but the right one. But it could also be that balance within yourself, and that you can create that within yourself. And part of it is going to be about, because you're very psychically connected to people, being able to detach from the wrong ones, with Uranus here, to be your true individual and what you want to do, not sacrificing for others, not always putting everybody else first, but detaching. That will help you create who you are and bring the right sort of energies, 8th house energies, into your life. So it was a little bit heavy, I have to say, pile 4, but I think that you have all that you need to deal with this. It's just recognizing the patterns and recognizing your own, I think, attractiveness and what that's bringing to you and how to navigate that. So I hope that it resonates. I hope you enjoyed the reading. If so, please like and subscribe. And I do hope that I see you in other episodes of this series. So there's 4 more to go now, between now and the end of the year, to have done every house. And if this is the first time that you've come across it, I have the houses of 1 to 7 already in a playlist if you want to check those out as well. Beyond that, I hope that I see you in future more general pick a card readings.